Hello and welcome to GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max broadcast number 131. This is your little insight into what's going on in the background for both GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max game makers, and anyone lucky enough to join us live gets to ask some questions and I'll answer as many of them as I can towards the end of the broadcast. But before the Q&A, I also want to show you something that's been going on demos wise, both in GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max Land. But before I do that, I just want to ask, if you are in the live chat and you do have a question, just stick a question mark at the end. It would be super useful. Why? Because then I can scroll through really quickly, find the questions, answer them quickly. Spend all my time trying to find a question, there's less time to answer. So, without further ado, let's charge on and talk about a little bit on GameGuru Classic. And the first thing I want to do is roll a video. Contributions abound. So GameGuru Classic, it's imminent that a new update's going to go out with an additional feature. This feature has been created by Cybernescence. And rather than me witter on about it, I'm going to run a video that I was sent. So let me play that one for you. Just want to intercept this video. You don't really know what you're watching, are you? Watch that big screen in the background that's animating footage, and also the little screens on the desks, and watch the textures of basically everything, because the feature you're going to get in GameGuru Classic real soon, thanks to Cybernescence, is the ability to change the texture of objects. You could do that in a limited way before with the alt texture. It's just been taken to the next level. So keep your eye out for all of the objects where the texture seems to be changing on you. And it goes on. But yes, you can change the textures of characters, of objects, of screens on the wall. You get the idea. I don't have the commits yet. I still need to go through those tests and make sure that they are accessible to the everyday person, you and I, and not just the province of the elite scripters out there. So I'll be looking forward to checking that out and then delivering it into your hands in a future update. So keep an eye out on GameGuru Classic for that. Me personally, I've been busy in other areas, slightly less sexy, not as much visuals, but I think is also super important. One of the things I discovered was there's a bug in the GameGuru X file to DBO converter. What does all that mean? Well, there may be some brand new weapons coming along for GameGuru Classic, and the converter was messing them up. So I fixed that bug so they're not messed up anymore. Hopefully that will facilitate the rapid release of some really cool weapons in our GameGuru Classic futures. And just to sort of put the cherry on top, I also made it a public repository. So there's a new repo on the game creators GitHub area called GameGuru Converter. Now, just a little bit of history. DirectX parsing for the longest time, the DirectX file format, was a 32-bit parser. And when we moved GameGuru Classic to 64-bit, we lost the ability to parse X files at 32-bit, which is why this converter was created, but it was always like a tool in the background. Well, we've now put it as a public repo, so you can actually get access to all the code. But I must say, it's still 32-bit and it's still Visual Studio 2017. So you're going to need all the appropriate ancillary tools in order to be able to compile. You probably never need to compile the converter. It's available for both GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max to convert X files to DBO in 32-bit. There is a way of doing a 64-bit X file converter, but it's just not a high priority. But absolutely, if someone in the community wants to tackle the challenge, this repository is the way to do it. Grab this one, clone it, look at the 32-bit version, see if you can do the 64-bit version. Because if I can get a repo update on this with the 64-bit runnable version, I can integrate it into GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max, so it doesn't have to be a separate executable running 32-bit. So that's a challenge for you. And I've provided some notes. There's lots of information via the source code as well, so just clone the repo, see how you get on. And the reason I make mention of Visual Studio 2017 is because also we've just released the 2022 repository for Classic. So for the longest time, GameGuru Classic was Visual Studio 2015 or 17. Threw all that away, it's now Visual Studio 2022, which is now freely available from Microsoft, and so you don't have to hunt around for these elusive tools that are no longer available publicly. So Visual Studio 2022 is available. All the projects now for GameGuru Classic repository are updated to that, so now you can just, I think it's about 3 projects you're going to compile, and then you create an executable, drop that into your GameGuru Classic folder, and you're away off to the races. And then you can of course change anything you want within the engine to suit your particular game project. It's a lot of work, but I felt it was worth it because when Microsoft dropped the availability of 2017, kind of ruined repository, i.e. you couldn't use it. So now we're up to 2022, you can use the repository again, and we made sure this repo is up to date. So that's something that I wanted to make mention of, because this should be good for a couple of years now. 2022 will stick around, it's the latest version, and Visual Studio 2022 is 64-bit. Believe it or not, all the Visual Studios up to this version were 32-bit IDEs. Visual 2022 is 64-bit, and it's already feeling much nicer than the previous versions. So go check that out. Anyway, that's GameGuru Classic. Let's talk about GameGuru Max. Okie dokie. So we've got a few things to show. I've already launched the GameGuru Max IDE, and we're going to go into our little RPG fest. And I could go into here, but I'll go into there in a second. First, I just want to run what I've been creating. If you've tuned into last week's broadcast, you'll already have seen some of this with a few additions. Have you noticed at the top you've now got this bar, this stamina bar? Didn't have that last week. So instead of just a number, you can actually have a number represented as a status bar, and you saw that filling in. Same with the mana bar at the bottom, that's also a status bar. And the player inventory. The reason that's crammed into the in-game HUD, it's never really supposed to be taking up all your screen space. It's just, whilst I have everything on one screen, it's easy to test. So we've started the work of doing the back-end coding for inventory containers for the player, and by extension inventory containers for objects, characters and the like. So let me just go through just as a repeat really and show you the new things. You already know about health, so you can go and collect health items. You've also got, now notice the stamina bar at the top and it says 100. So let's say you upgraded your player skills and you get more stamina, then that 100 you might want to increase it so your maximum stamina is 200. Well, this eat to consume stamina makes it 200. As you can see, the status bar slowly increases your stamina to your new player maximum. Now if I hold down shift, which is run, not really, I'm in a small confined space, but if I just keep jiggling around, sorry about the dizziness, you'll notice the stamina bar going down because I'm running all the time, and if I jump as well, I'm eating chunks out of stamina, and then once I've run into stamina, then I slow down. If I stop and have a rest, I'll throw a bit of sound effect here at some point, so your stamina bar slowly increase. Anyone who plays an RPG game knows what a stamina bar is and its use. Now this is built in to one of the templates that we would provide, things like health and stamina and a couple of other things. We're just building in out of the box just to save you a bit of time. And you just saw that collectible increase my overall maximum stamina for the rest of this game. Mana, I've moved. So I think mana's in this little room. So if I just jump over that wall, E to collect mana potion. You notice that's different from E to use mana, because this I want to put in my inventory. So I press E. You'll now notice in player inventory I've now got the mana portion in my inventory grid. And this is extremely early days. We're doing a lot more with you know, how big the grid is, what images it's using, how big it is, all that kind of stuff you can configure. We're just getting the back-end data structure sorted out first. And unlike using it right away, I can go somewhere else, wait a while, and then when I want my mana, I can use it. So I can use it from the inventory. Mana absorbed, and now you see you got your mana status bar filled up with 20. I think the overall bar is 100. And just like stamina maximum, you can increase your mana maximum as your player improves in skills, etc. So that's what we've been adding and what we're working on right now. So I'm pretty happy with the status bar. Let me show you how that's implemented. You'll recognize this. This is sort of just the 2D HUDs without all the 3D level. And as you can see, you've got your status bar here, which is actually user-defined portal per, because in order for a bar to do its thing, you need two values. You need the current stamina and you need the overall maximum stamina. So you only need stamina. So you only need those two values to be inserted into this gadget for it to do its job of drawing out a bar. The bar itself can be provided by a set of images. So it's not just a box. You can have any image you want for the empty bar and every image you want for the full bar, and it will just do the rest for you. And rather than something hard-coded, these aren't hard-coded. These are just template variables that we're setting up out of the box. You can have any global from your script system, ultimately your game logic system, as you want. These are just the ones we're starting you off with. So anything that you want to have a bar representing can be kind of placed here, and then you can control what that does using these two variables here, these variables here, these valuable variables here. And this isn't final design. This is just what we're working with to create all the mechanisms. We're already planning to improve this area. We've realized that very quickly you're going to have so many globals they'll just scroll on forever. So we're going to change this to a drop down, which will make it a lot more convenient for you to see at a glance and then select something, and then you get the idea. So we're going to be working on that to improve. Another thing I want to show you, and it's something that was mentioned, you notice that when the mana went up to 100, who defines what the 100 is? Well, if you look at this hide text, this is actually a user-defined global called myManaMax. And if you look down, myManaMax is set to 100. And in the past, you actually had to hide that 100 somewhere, but now there's an extra tick box, so you can actually set up these default values, but then hide them. Or maybe you want to do a test game, you want to keep these values on the screen somewhere, maybe in your in-game HUD, or maybe there's another screen which is like your own personal game development screen where you can see all of these globals at a glance. So we've actually given you the option. It treated like any other gadget, you drop it in, but now you get to hide it on a whim if you want it to be hidden for the actual final game. So I'm pretty pleased about that. So that's what we're doing so far. A lot of work still to do. The player inventory was really just the first screen that we're going to be tackling, and later this week, and hopefully we'll be able to show this in next Wednesday's broadcast, is we'll go back to the storyboard. Right now you've only got this one screen in-game HUD, and it's pretty fixed. That just shows as soon as the level starts. There's going to be a new button in between add new level and add existing level called add new screen, which will add as many of these as you need for your game. So this screen is for in-game HUD. You might have a second screen for inventory, and inside the inventory there'll be a new property here which allows you to assign a key to toggle that inventory screen. So let's say the I key would bring up this player inventory, none of this other stuff, just the player inventory, and then you can add all the gadgets you need to populate an entire inventory screen, and then rinse and repeat for all the different kinds of screens you want. So the ambition is next Wednesday I'll be able to show lots of different screens, the in-game default HUD, inventory screen, a couple of others, and the inventory system will have moved on a pace. So instead of just a little bit of a quick hack just to show you like one item, You'll be able to run around the level, collect lots of different objects, and see those objects populate your grid. And more than that, and I'll just show you a little advanced look. More than that, in addition to seeing the little image, you'll also get to see the expanded view. So you'll see in many RPG games, when you select an item, you get more details about it. So maybe you want to see a big picture of what it looks like. You might want some additional facts about the object. And all of these are part of additional gadgets that we're going to need to finish off the inventory screen. So keep an eye out for that. Looking forward to revealing more. And then there's only a handful of gadgets. If anyone's seen the RPG guide yet, there's only like 9 gadgets, but those 9 gadgets can create literally any combination of RPG screen you've ever experienced. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. It's going to be pretty cool. So that's it for the demo section. Let's move swiftly onto the Q&A and see if there's any worthy questions. Okay, I have a chat window hiding somewhere on one of my screens. And here it is. You know, I'm always expecting when I see the live chat, there's just 15 statements with exclamation marks saying, Lee, we can't hear you. If you go back to the very early broadcasts, the chats were full of that. But it looks like worthy questions are abound and no one is worried about sound. So I'm going to scroll to the top. Just have a quick check. Is Zach in the house? No, it's me today. So let's look for a question. Mark. The first question, Mark, comes from Peck. So let's look at that. For the sake of consistency, is health also getting the status bar treatment instead of a visual numeric value? Yes, of course. At the moment, the health, the ammo panel, the ammo left, the ammo clip, those are kind of hard-coded. But that was just to start us off recreating the very, very hard-coded in-game health and ammo and getting it onto the screen editor. It was very apparent very quickly there's no sense in having those hard-coded stuff. So instead what you're going to be able to do is just drag in a regular old status bar widget, and then you'll be able to have a drop down where you can pick the fixed stuff and then your own custom stuff. That includes the health bar. So don't worry about it. Health bar will get the treatment. We're not going to force you into corners here. If you want numbers, if you want slider bars, you get to choose. Super Confident Man adds to that, can health be shown as a gauge? I think so. We are definitely going to do the compass and arrow. Now, you know what the arrow is? It can face up, down, left and right and rotate in all the angles to point to your next objective. Wouldn't be too difficult to usurp that gadget to have a gauge. With 0 at one end and then 90 degrees to the clockwise, it's 100%. And then the arrow, the little needle, moves back and forward between the two. Again, think about the status bar. It requires 2 values, a 0 and a maximum, and then a current value between those two, and then a graphic that interpolates that value in some graphical way. So yeah, I think the gauge and the compass needle probably will be the same gadget. So please someone remind me of that by email, because I think it's a good point and we shouldn't really miss it out in this extremely first iteration of the screen editor gadgets. Here's a question from Monkey Frog Studio. Will there be a way of bringing up the mouse cursor to select inventory items to use them, move them around in the inventory? Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Kind of got one foot in the VR camp and one foot in the keyboard and mouse, and VR does not have mouse pointers. So yeah, I do think it would be super useful. Like you're running around FPS. In fact, the more I think about it, most RPGs do give you that mouse pointer to interact with your 2D screens instead of messing around with up, down and left and right to get everywhere. I think that's an obvious massive yes, isn't it? Of course you will have a mouse pointer to click on all the different things, the item selections, the buttons, the scrollies. So yeah, assume that's a big yes. Okay, this is a question from Dad Good. Will you be able to keep your inventory between different levels? Absolutely yes. The game would be broken without. Otherwise your entire game would live on one level. And then when you move to level 2, you lose all the stuff you've collected. Yeah, there will be a little bit of jiggery poker at the back end. It's something I have to worry about, which is you may create a level 2 that doesn't, and you haven't put in the objects that existed in level 1 that you created. And so level 2 would have to have the intelligence of sort of loading in the objects that are in your pocket when you arrived in level 2. And I am kind of avoiding the idea of creating objects in during the game, but I think it's okay if it loads in those dynamic objects during the load phase. Because when you try and load and create stuff whilst you're playing the game at 60 FPS, you get stutters. But during the loading phase, yeah, I think we can get away with that. But absolutely, you're going to want to collect something in level 1 and use it in level 3. And also come from level 3 and go back to level 1 and put it back where you found it. Another question from Monkey Frog Studio. Will HUD elements be able to be animated? Many RPG games use some animation for things like the mana. Not for version 1. And the reason I say that is simply that not everyone has the skills to create lots of animated HUDs, texture atlases, and apply them. A lot of people will be able to find images on Google and drag them in and resize them and place them at the front or at the back. So that's why version 1 is favouring those. What we will do, however, is once an artist, Monkey Frog Studio, creates a lot of texture atlases with animations expressly designed for HUD elements, we'll support that feature within a week. I'm going to do it that way around. Wait till there's lots of lovely animations for HUDs, and then we'll put that feature in. I think that is the right way around. The other way around, we'll have nothing to demonstrate. We'll say, yeah, the feature's in, but you can't see it because we haven't got any animations to show you. So hopefully, yeah, that's a bit of a teaser. But yeah, it's a call to action. Keith C asks, what's going on, everyone? We're in the GameGuru Max and GameGuru Classic broadcast, Keith. Next question from Extreme Strategy. With RPG things being made, will there be fantasy and medieval assets and characters soon? Not out of the box, GameGuru Max. We made a decision yonks ago that GameGuru Max will focus on the creation of tools and fixing bugs and refining and polishing features. The job of creating assets and characters and character parts and things will become the provincial area of the third-party artist or community member. We was in the business of creating tens of thousands of assets for GameGuru Classic, and we got as much scorn and ridicule as we got praise. So it's not really a great mission to try and create every object ever needed ever for a game maker, and so we're not going to try in Max. We're going to focus on the tooling, and there are plenty of options out there for you to find the art that you need for your game and bring it in, or create the art yourself. But I do anticipate that there will be DLCs in the future that feature fantasy and medieval assets and more character varieties, absolutely. But we'll be looking for third-party artist support in that respect. It will not be coming from the core development team to avoid the criticism that we're spending all our time creating DLCs instead of working on the core engine. Okay, another question from Super Confident Man. Can the HUDs change colour, flash, depending on the values? In the hacked, hard-coded version of Yonder Year, yes, the HUDs could change colour dynamically based on what was happening in the game, but the what's happening in the game mechanic has had to be removed because the new screen editor is a generic system. And the images you move in, you can change the image and change the colour, but those colours are fixed. How you change those colours would require some kind of logic to intercede. However, I think probably that will come in the way of Lua script. So some additional commands to change the colours of the HUD elements via Lua. I think that's probably going to start the process, and then we'll figure out how you can expose it to everybody else. Just for anyone else, the example is, let's say your health gets below 50 and then the health panel starts glowing red, back to normal, glowing red, back to normal. How do you do that? How do you create that? Right now, all we have available is Lua scripting. And not everybody wants to. In fact, most people don't want to Lua script. So how does that happen? Do we hard code some effects that you can apply to HUD elements and then trigger them? that might be a way. But then again, we're edging towards the hardcodey side of things. Really want to keep it super open. So I think for now, we'll look at doing it via script and then see how that can manifest itself so everyone else can use it. Okay, here's a question. Another one from Super Confident Man. Do we have rocket propelled grenades yet and NPC grenade throwers? No, we don't have rocket propelled grenades. And we don't have NPC grenade throwers. No plans to have those in for version 1. That's not on the short list. Here's a question from Monkey Frog Studio. Can we get snapping for the HUD creator in the storyboard? We need to be able to exactly line up stuff in the HUD. Yeah, you may have noticed that there's lines, like little guiding lines in the HUD, but it doesn't snap to them, which I suppose is a huge disappointment. And it has been mentioned in the internal team that snapping will be super cool. You know, to say, if you've got like a line at the bottom of your screen and you lock everything onto that same horizontal, you kind of have to do it by pixel and it's never right. So yeah, I think that will happen. It's not a huge job, just something that someone somewhere has to remember when they're actually in the screen editor, just to make sure that not only do you have the grid line, but you also a little snappy, probably is a tick box. Similar to how we do it in the level editor for GameGuru Max General. Okay, another question. Oh, Super Confident Matt asks, will the jetpack return and how configurable? Jetpacks are not planned for version 1. Drivable vehicles. Drivable vehicles are not planned for version 1. As to when, after version 1. There'll be a big list of things everybody wants after version 1. Not sure where drivable vehicles stack in that massive, huge list of things that everybody wants. First question of the night from Nightfall X. And to add on Monkey Frog's question, particles in HUD. No plans to add particles in the 2D HUD system. Particles will very shortly be entirely volumetric and totally 3D. And so sticking them in the 2D screen editor would be a bit of a fudge. Although we haven't ruled out in the long term to have 3D elements in the screen editor as 2D elements. Once we get to that conversation, yeah, particles could re-emerge as another conversation piece, but right now, absolutely not part of version 1 release plan. Two more from Super Confident Man. When will Max get those new features from Classic? When will Max get those new features from Classic? If you're talking about the feature we've just shown in the demo section for Classic, that already exists in Max. It's called Change Texture. Go into the Behaviors library, go check that out. It's pretty cool. The previous broadcast as well also featured it. Weapons totally decoupled from hands yet. They are for melee. All of the non-melee ones, like things you shoot and put bullets in, those are still using the old weapon system. The only stuff of the new weapon system is the melee stuff. The crowbars, the screwdrivers. If you look at the booster packs, there's lots of stuff like that. And that's the new weapon system. We've not finished the new weapon system for projectile weaponry. Once that's done, then I can say yes to that question, and then the decoupling will be complete. Once the decoupling is complete, then we can start messing around and having cool conversations about what do we want to do with the hands, the skin, the sizes, the texture, and then making it just a little bit easier for people to swap out one weapon and put in a different weapon using the new weapon system. But that's for the future. For now, we still need to finish the projectile weapon placement within the new weapon system. Here's a question from Tom. Will we be able to use each level as a different world zone? So as you leave one area, you could load in the next level area. Level could be a city where we enter. Yeah, that was always the plan, to have a non-linear sequence for GameGuru Max. So even though we're calling it level 1, level 2, level 3, it could be level A, level B, level C, level Moon, level Mars, level Earth. And then the ability for the player to move indiscriminately between any of those locations through portals. That was always one of the intentions, just to create a lot more variety in the kind of games you can make. And even in Classic, people were doing that, but it was a bit of a fudge. In Max, it's properly supported. So yeah, look out for that. It's a pretty cool extra feature for the storyboard. Another one from Super Confident Man. What is this, your 9th question? Fantasy parts to character creator. No plans to add fantasy parts to the character creator. Just skipping that question for a second. Super Confident, when will Visual Logic revamp? No plans to revamp Visual Logic for version 1. Going back up one, Keith C. Can we get a hotkey to bring back the widget when we need it. Makes it easy to work with assets on the fly. There is a hotkey for widgets. If you press F1, it will toggle between the GameGuru Max Smart Object Mode and then the widget, which will go back to the XYZ widget system. If you mean a hotkey to move between position, rotation and scale, then yeah, see me afterwards. I can't remember whether there is a hotkey for that. I think there is. It's F2, F3, F4. Go check that out in the latest build. You might be lucky. And another question mark comes from Jonathan. Is GameGuru Max compatible with the controller Xbox? Not at the moment, but we're working on VR. And VR already requires us to look at the VR controllers. And as part of that process, we're also looking at all the standard game controllers. I have about 4 physical game controllers, and I'm going to intend to support them all. One of them is in Xbox. So it is planned for version 1 to have plug in your controller and then play your 2D game with your controller. If you're in VR, you're going to use the VR controller. Keith C asks how you're looking to get weather effects on the horizon. Not for version 1, we're going to stick with the rain and the snow that we currently have in GameGuru Max. I know they're not the most awe-inspiring visual effects, but we're going to leave them for version 1 whilst we focus on other things, more meaty gameplay related things. I think there will be opportunities down the road to improve not just the existing rain and snow effects, but to add more weather effects like thunder and lightning, which should be really exciting. And just as an aside, if you're interested in thunder and lightning, there is on the asset store, I think there is a little third-party purchase that actually adds some lightning and some thunder if you really want those in your game during the early access phase of GameGuru Max. Okay, Fearless Wee's first question. Will weapons have an option to take up inventory space? Also, what about inventory items to take up multiple squares, like System Shock and Resident Evil 4? Good question about multiple squares. In my design brief, I never considered that, but it is an important aspect of some RPG games that large items consume more of a fixed inventory grid. At the moment, I plan my inventory to be infinite in size, but limited by weight. So it's the object's weight that limits how much you can carry. But yeah, I don't know. Not everyone's going to agree with the you spend half your time organising your inventory grid to try and get everything in place. So I'll leave that up to the community. Is that something that you think we should stop one thing to start working on that? But it's not planned at the moment for the current inventory system. We're going to base it on weight. So if you collect 500 weight points of a thing, you're slow to a crawl, and it takes you ages to get back to your home where your treasure chest is, where you can put all your loot, etc. So kind of play in that angle, which other RPGs do rather than the physical grid size allocations. But yeah, inventory is coming all shapes and sizes, and we should definitely consider that before skipping over it completely. Question mark is another one from Jonathan. I would like to know when the limit of 32 textures on painted textures will be increased. Is there a next update planned concerning this limit? No plans to change the limit for version 1. The limit is largely based on, I think we had a texture array of 32, which was quite a large texture array. It's efficient, but that was a lot of textures. And we also have a plan to do like texture overlays. So 32 textures would be what you call your base terrain textures, and then on top of that you have a near unlimited amount of stuff you can splat on top of those base textures. It might be when we do that you don't need to increase the limit beyond 32. 32 textures, those are like the base textures. Think about them as sort of like the grass in the distance, far off in the distance. You don't really need 17 different kinds of grass texture when you're looking at it slapped onto the side of a mountain 2 miles away. That's what the base textures do. They just get the one grass texture painted off in the distance. Your game stays fast. That's what that 32 limit is really about. Question. Here's one from War Pickle Productions. Is there any plans to allow players to customise their controls and assign what keys they want to use? Yes, that's part of the VR work. You know, the VR controllers and the game controllers. Whilst we're doing that, we're also doing key mapping, because not everyone uses the same buttons or have the same handedness. So being able to reconfigure what the buttons and the keys do, super important before we release version 1, and that extends to the standalone. So when you give someone your game, You go into the game menu, there's a control menu where you can then get access to the same remapper. And of course the clever part is to have that as another HUD screen, so then the remapper is something you can customize for the game that you've made. Just checking the clock, we're at 36 minutes in, that's not too bad. Sometimes we've gone to 45 before I've looked at the clock, so I can answer a few more questions before we get worried. Is there any blah 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 blah? Next question, this is from CDEWEYH. Can chat opt be used to add code to GG Max? Yeah, I know that's trending right now, isn't it? The chat GPT. Apparently it can write shaders for you. I don't think so. There isn't really code as such in GameGuru Max. Max has been designed so you don't need to code or create art. You can just drag things in, make a few configurations, press a button, you've made a game. At the short end, that's basically what GameGuru Max allows you to do. If you asked it to create some Lua script for GameGuru Max, I think ChatGPT would just throw a fit. It would do something, but it couldn't be used in GameGuru Max. So don't put all your faith in AI just yet. Another question. This is the second question from War Pickle. Is there any plans for players to keep the weapons they pick up and such from level to level? I know it was mentioned earlier in RPG, but yes, the same. Weapons, ammo, apples, power-ups, skill progressions. When you move to level 2, you still want to be the same player that you was in level 1, holding the same things that you had in level 1. Don't worry about that. That's something we need to work on before we can even say it's a finished game maker, because otherwise it would just look broken. Okay, yeah, Keith C confirms F1 to move, F3 to rotate, scale widget F4 maybe. Okay, question from Tom. Will we have options with the weight stats you just mentioned, like if the player is only just over the limit, you can slow by a set amount, and then as you go further, you get slower? Yeah, I think there will be some parameter or parameters in order to decide how much impact that weight would have on the player's ability to move. Even the stamina right now already has that influence on how fast the player moves. We just add another built-in global, which would allow you to affect it not just from stamina, but how much you're carrying. I think something like Fallout, I think it was Fallout, it literally just slammed on the brakes once you went 1 point over your allocated weight. And I kind of like that. It was a nice clean way of, you know, oh, I need to drop that extra can of iron just so I can run quickly back to where I need to get to. Otherwise, I'm being greedy and I have to walk at 1 mile an hour. So it might just be an on-off thing, or it might be a scale thing. We haven't implemented it yet. But it certainly will be the initial way we're going to control, you know, how much you can carry in your inventory at any one time. And of course, all these things are variable. You can just increase the maximum weight. You could have it so as your player progresses, you can carry more. You know, that again will be up to you. Okay, question marks. Jonathan has a question mark. When the next update will be released? Thanks for everything you do. GameGuru Max makes one of my dreams come true. Well, that's one of our objectives, and always has been. You know, one of the reasons we started doing Game Makers way back is, you know, people wanted to make games but really didn't know how, or didn't have the time, or didn't have 3 years to learn all the programming language, etc. And it's amazing over the years, a lot of the people that just started off making a simple game now work in the games industry and are programmers. They just needed that initial leg up, you know, just to create a couple of things and get a smile on the face. So I'm really pleased that I'm making one of your dreams come true, and hopefully getting into the games industry would be the next one. As to when the next update will be released, they're always being released on the EXP build. So if you go into Steam and go into Beta tab, you'll see an EXP branch. If you don't see it, go into the socials, the little password you can enter in, and then EXP shows up. And you get access to lots of updates all the time. As to the official one, that's probably going to be in March. When we do a big announcement and tell you all the things that have changed since Christmas. Generally around March, I think. Or maybe February. But the EXP build is probably the one you want if you want to keep up to date all the time. Okay, question from Tom. Will RPG add an experience stat so you gain XP if you kill things or complete quests? Yes. Yeah, that's the player skills screen. That's the one that we're going to work on after inventory. So once inventory is buzzing along nicely, we can collect things, use things, drop things, organise things. That leads naturally onto player skills, which you've already seen. Maximum stamina, maximum armour. Player skills page is where all that is hosted, including constant gaining of XP. When your XP turns onto a level up gives you skill points. Skill points you can spend to increase more armor and more stamina max and things like that. All part and parcel of the RPG experience, and something we'll be demonstrating in the weeks to come. So keep an eye out for that. Super exciting to be able to reveal all that. Blasting through the live chat now to find one from Uzi Clip. Is it possible to export games VR made in GameGuru Max VR option to Android? It is not possible to export games to Android. This will be a Windows 10 or above PC only game that you can make in GameGuru Max. There are zero plans to export to any other platform. So if you were holding out for that, it's not going to happen. Not in my lifetime, or at least not in my foreseeable future. There's so much to do just on the PC one, and still so much to do in the Game Maker. This is just first person. People have been asking for third person vehicles, all the rest of it. So we'll be pretty busy before we start thinking about other platforms. So sorry about that. And there go, Dead Live. Hi, will there be a VR version on Steam? I think I know what you mean. Like, Steam has a separate library for VR titles, and I was checking out a couple of VR titles very recently and thinking, maybe we could call it GameGuru VR. But I instantly stopped that thought. Let's get GameGuru Max finished. Let's get GameGuru Max fully supporting VR. We will list it on Steam as VR compatible. And it might just be that's all we need to do. If we can get some extra eyeballs by making a sort of special VR version, we might consider that. But that's not our top priority right now. We just want to get this Game Maker rounded off, playing really good. But yeah, you'll certainly have a VR ability within GameGuru Max, and it will be available through Steam and supported with Steam's hardware. The Index is the one I'm testing on, which is pretty cool, by the way. Nader B10, will weapons be as items in the inventory? Yeah, could be. At the moment, they're not really. Weapons aren't really like objects. Weapons are like something else. But it's already been mentioned even in this live chat. So I'm wondering whether that's an important consideration. So maybe some sort of tick box in the weapon properties which says weapons are actual objects and actually show up in your inventory to take up all your inventory space. And also, if you remember RPG games where you can move a weapon into the left or right hand of a visible character that's on the screen, that's something that we had planned for like melee and RPG and all that kind of stuff. And as I'm thinking about it now, it does make perfect sense that you'd extend that logic to all the weapons, including the projectile ones, to place the projectile weapons in your left or right hand. So yeah, I think that's going to be a thing. So thanks for that question. That was something that gives me something else to think about. Trying to track all the questions now. We're getting quite a few in. Tom, will we be able to use Particle Editor to create your own spells for RPG? Yeah, absolutely. That's what the Particle Editor is for. Anyone knows what we're talking about? GameGuru Max, if you go into one of the menus, you'll see a Particle Editor. It's a free tool within Max. Go in, create a nice particle, and then save it out, and you can use that particle by dropping it into your level. We will be extending that so you can attach a particle to an effect. Certainly attach it to weapons, but of course if you're going to cast a spell is a kind of weapon, and so that weapon spell would have an optional particle effect you can assign to it, including a particle that you've designed yourself. So that should be really exciting, and you should be able to share it as well with the community. Okay, or will you add a spell creation add-on? No plans to do a spell creator or a weapon creator for version 1. They're all great ideas, but we're going to wait till after version 1 before we consider the list and find out what's important. Okay, question mark from Mr. Jack. Will there be filters, plugins, or something that like that for different types of visual styles, like pixelated or polygon heavy, like with Unreal Engine. There are no plans to support Unreal Engine filters or plugins like for like. However, we do have a couple of post-process effects. We can change the style of that final post-process screen to a couple of different styles. Not necessarily pixelated, more to do with the colour palette and how that can change. But there's no plans to do a heavy post-process alteration for version 1. But if you want to go into more details in the Discord or on the socials, I'd love to find out, you know, what kind of thing you were thinking about. Even just links or screenshots to videos from the Unreal filters and plugins, and also the case study. Why do you need it? Is it just give me a big list of features that Unreal Engine have, or is it some particular game that you want to make and you need that particular feature? That's more. I'm more inclined to add a feature in if it suits a specific need, rather than just trying to compete with every other feature that ever existed in the games industry, which I'm less excited about. UziClip asks another one. GameGuru Max, any ideas to work to make games in Linux? No plans to do a Linux version of GameGuru Max or to export games to Linux. Question from Jonathan. I see a video of a person breaking a window into several pieces. How do you do this? Is it possible to do it with other objects? If you've seen that in GameGuru Max, it's because an artist has created an object that can look like a single piece, then also has an animation where it all shatters apart. And then they drop the object in, assign a behavior that will then, at a trigger point, run the animation and it shatters into a million pieces. It's not a built-in game engine feature, it's a clever bit of art from an artist. That's probably what you've seen. Another question from Monkey Frog Studios. Will there be a means for inventory items to take up more space than others? For example, the sword might use 2 inventory items while a potion uses 1. See previous answer. It's not planned for the current inventory system and it's not planned for version 1, but there's a big case for it. In fact, if the case is, Lee, there are more RPG games that do that than use the weight system, then I'll absolutely sit up and listen to it. But I need examples. I need proof, people. Because currently that's not part of the design guide that's been put together for the RPG implementation. Here's a question from Nada. Will there be support for importing particles and 3D effects from third-party programs? No plans to import arbitrary particle file formats from arbitrary third-party programs. The only one we are supporting right now is the built-in particle editor for GameGuru Max. And that should suffice for now. I have been looking at other third-party particle creation systems, but they're usually tied to some draconian license, which means you can't actually use it in the end anyway, or you've got to pay a gargantuan license fee, or there's some restrictions. And so after a lot of research, I end up stepping away from all these third-party particle systems that look so great, but are also used by AAA studios, and they can afford to pay what the people want for the licenses. So the particle editor that comes with GameGuru Max, it's free to use. You can use it. There's no restrictions. When you use it, create all your own particles, or get the particles from the library, put them in your game, and sell your game, and no strings. So that's the only one we can trust right now. But if you can find another particle third-party program out there that has a free license and there's no strings and all the rest of it, and you can sell your game when you've made your game with those particles, then let me know, because I'm super interested in expanding support for tools that help you make a game faster without us having to reinvent that particular wheel. And that's it. There's no more question marks. I'm sure there may be 1 or 2 more questions, but no one put any question marks at the end. And we're looking at the clock and it's now 50 minutes in. This may be one of the longest broadcasts due to an extended question time. But as we've dropped the Discord that we tried out at the end of last year, I think that's perfectly fair. So hopefully you enjoyed all the answers. Thank you very much for your questions. I'll be here again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. GMT with more news on GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max, and of course happy to answer all of your lovely questions. So hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for showing up, and I look forward to speaking to you all again next week. So until then, goodbye.